Again, welcome to everyone who's joining us. Thank you so much for being here. There is a question for you. I believe a few of you have answered. Would you rather deliver a presentation in your underwear? It doesn't have to be ugly underwear. Or would you rather deliver a presentation while sweating profusely? So I'm gonna give you guys just maybe 2 more minutes. I'm hoping to get started at 4:35, so that way we get as many participants who are running late. There's already a majority for those of you who might be curious. Okay, I think I actually have a good number of people now. So actually, I have a good number of people who have joined. I think I'm going to get started so that way we can enjoy the full amount of time that's been given to us today. And as the results of the poll, let me share the results. So a majority of you preferred to deliver a presentation in your underwear versus risk presenting with giant sweat stains. Personally, that would have been my choice as well. I can always wear very nice underwear. I cannot get rid of an underarm sweat stain on the presentation. So there you have it. So thank you so much. Welcome to putting the pre in presentation. I would love to thank Chitra for inviting me and Slash and HAK team for inviting me today as a kickoff for the series that are happening in this month and the next month. So my name is Mitsy. I put my first 3 letters, MIT, in yellow just because I oftentimes get dyslexia. People reverse my name. So it's Mitsy. And I'm from the United States, but I've been living in Cambodia for the past 3 years. I'm going now into my 4th year here. And what I do regularly is put together events, trainings, classroom lectures, but that in general focus on helping people unlock their potential to speak in front of crowds, to speak publicly, and to do so with passion, to do so with confidence, to do so efficiently. And I have a background in improv, in storytelling. I run a storytelling event. It was pre-COVID times. I run a storytelling event here in Phnom Penh, and I've also done some acting. So these are all of the things that I am drawing from in order to talk today about presenting and some of the ways we can talk about, we can improve our presentation style. So here's another poll for you guys. Here we go. Launch. You are born with self-confidence. Is this a true statement or a false statement? Go ahead and answer, and I'll give you guys about 1 minute to submit your response. I have about 75% of you who voted. Oof. We're actually neck and neck right now. Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, one person made it through. No, did I? Okay, I'm ending the poll because all of you have voted, but just by one small vote, there was a majority that said that false, you are not born with self-confidence, or false to the statement that you are born with self-confidence. And for the purposes of this presentation, although, yes, there are some people who are perhaps more inclined to be in front of people, who are a little bit more comfortable in front of people naturally, self-confidence isn't something that is born. You develop that over time. It is actually a skill. And that skill is built using different techniques. It's built over time. It's built with practice. And so in this presentation, we're going to talk about one way to build that self-confidence, and that is by being prepared for your presentation. And I'm going to divide this workshop out into 3 different parts. It's going to be part 1, making a good first impression. Part 2, that a PowerPoint does not equal the presentation. And then last, part 3, impress, but don't distract above all. So before we actually do that, what I also want to do is to have you guys log in here, and here's the link in the chat. So I just dropped it into the chat. If you could just click on that link, it will take you to jamboard.google.com. And this is a place where I will be able to collect your ideas in one spot. If you've never used Jamboard before, I have an opening question, and I'll show you what I'm looking at right now. I have an opening question that I've asked you just to mess around. So you can click on the sticky note over here. It will pop open a sticky note, and then you can type in your response. And we'll use that 3 times today to gather your thoughts in one place. So just share what you had for breakfast if you want, and yeah, just for practice if you're looking for something to post. All right, leave that window open and we'll come back to it. I'll let you know when. So first, let's get started with talking about making a good first impression. And frankly, I hope that I made a good first impression, right? So if you wouldn't mind sharing, what were some of my opening strategies that you noticed me using to talk to you today? And you can put your answers in the chat. What were some things that you noticed, or what were some things specifically that I did to introduce myself to you and to hopefully make a good first impression? Again, your answers, you can type them into the chat. So a fun ice-breaking activity to Nick. Hi, Nick, thank you. Yeah, so I open up the session with a random would you rather question, which I think half of you had been able to answer. And so I opened up, yes, Kevin, by asking a question. I also have had and used, as Piet just said, some interactive polls. So these are 2 opening strategies that I used today. Whoops. How did those activities perhaps change your attitude towards this entire presentation? Did you feel a little bit more alert? Were you looking forward to the next one? Were you like, oh no, it's one of these types of presentations? How did it change your attitude going into today's session? You can type your answer into the chat. So Maysan says, I feel more engaged. Thank you so much. Hi and welcome. So for Nick, it's late afternoon and this is making me feel more engaged. Chitra says it made her feel uplifting. From Sophia says that it's more active listening, looking for more information, polls, more useful insight. Yeah, so that's literally the point, right? Thank you so much for your responses. What audience interaction does is kick off and change the dynamics of the audience and presenter. Rather than coming in and sitting back and expecting me to do all of the work, right? You guys suddenly move from being spectators with popcorn in your hands to now being actively engaged participants. So this is why it's so important to kick off audience interaction from the very beginning. So I'm sure many of you have been in presentations before. So I'm going to switch to Jamboard to get your thoughts. What are, and in order to get to the second window, I'm going to click on next frame. You can see up here. And now I'm in the second window. So what are some forms of audience participation that you enjoy the most? And the reason why I'm asking you in Jamboard is because rather than it just simply be me sharing my best thoughts, I'm sure that there are some ideas for audience participation that you might come up with. So what are some forms of audience participation that work best for you guys? I'll start, I can type one in. I like jokes. If I could spell. Okay, yeah. Any other forms of participation that you guys enjoy the most? On this virtual event, I like when we have to show the audience something that we have in common and show it to the camera. Oh yeah, for sure. I've been in events where we've had to like do a collective drawing. We used a whiteboard and we had to like make something and then present it, for sure. Any others? The latest of research that results with the topic. So you enjoy when people share research information, so trivia or statistics that are related to the topic. Give the audience a motivating and inspiring story based on the content type of the event. Yes, absolutely. So when you share personal details or you allow for people just a little insight into what your background is and you tie it to the event, it makes a huge difference. And that's why I love storytelling so much myself. Favorite mugs. Oh, I've never done that. That's really cute. I haven't been in a lot of Zooms with or a lot of online presentations where I've had to be with other adults. It's been mostly teaching my students who are adults technically, but 18, 19, 20, 21. They're just beginning. A funny GIF, images, a real demonstration. Yeah, absolutely. All these ways, thank you so much. All these are really valid ways to engage your audience. And so I'm going to underline that as well. And there are generally 4 different types of interactions that I would suggest that you use. And you don't have to use all of them, but they each have their benefits. So questions, polls, breakouts, and activities. When you're first opening up your presentation, you want to ease people into your presentation. So you might want to consider in the beginning simple questions, questions that have an A or a B, a yes or a no, a true or false. That way people just respond gut. They don't have to think too hard about their questions, their answers, excuse me. But then later on, you start to build that trust, and then you can engage with more discussion questions. By asking questions, you show that the audience matters, that their opinion, that their experience is valid and can be accepted. So examples of this would be a question that you can ask. Have you used this software before? And it's a simple yes or no. And you start to realize where people might be as far as introducing a new thing. I could have done that with Jamboard, for example. Or a true or false. Managers can make effective leaders. By having a true or false question, you can easily start to create a forum for an important discussion later. Some people may agree with this statement and some people may disagree, but this true or false question asked at the beginning gets people thinking a little bit more about your topic. Then you can have polls. I'm a big fan of polls just because it really is such an easy way to get a sense, get a pulse on the room. You just quickly get to laugh or see who's out there, and people can laugh at the results or be surprised by the results. And it just really teaches you something and it gives you something easy to work with. When it comes to polls, you want to consider the tech that you're going to need, because not every platform or not every situation in which you're presenting will lend itself to polls. So in Zoom, obviously, I can use the poll feature in Zoom. It's really easy. I love it. And I prepare ahead of time the poll. So that way, if I want to ask a question, as you might have noticed, the poll that I used may have said A or B. It didn't actually have the question. The question was in the slide. So I use generic polls in Zoom, so that way I can always ask questions on the fly and just simply say A or B, true or false, or even A, B, C, or D. If you are presenting in front of a live audience, you can also use any of the other poll software software websites that you see here, ones that are more interactive like Kahoot, and others that are a little bit more professional like Mentimeter or Poll Everywhere. They all have a slight learning curve, but it's all really worth it if you want to check throughout your presentation how well people are understanding the information or keep them a little awake. So an example that you can use for polls, a post-baccalaureate is critical for moving into senior level positions. And so you can create a strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Oops. Sorry, I just noticed that I had a couple of chats, and so forgive me for not having responded right away. So thank you for the little accolades, Kasifi, excuse me. And then the audience members can also raise their hands and stand up when voting. Absolutely, that's exactly why yes or no's are really easy. Thank you so much. And then you have breakouts. Now, breakouts are something that we are used to seeing in conferences. You have a giant audience full of 100, 150, and turn to the person next to you in groups of 4, talk to each other. But now we can do that in Zoom. I didn't plan any type of activity for breakouts because I knew that in an hour, I may not have time to do both every type of interaction and still leave room for questions. But it's still something that is a functionality in Zoom and in Google Meets, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Breakouts give people a chance to first relax and stop putting their student brain or their learning brain on and take a little bit of a mental break while they talk to other people, think a little more about the content. And then it also, in non-English settings, it can also help you to talk through an idea without feeling embarrassed about your levels of English. So that's something that I'm living in a country where obviously English is not the first language. So breakouts are really, really critical to help people build the confidence to discuss their ideas come up collectively with a unified point, and then to share as a group, and usually picking the person who has the best English, but depending on which language you're presenting in, obviously, then you have people who feel more confident, and more voices are shared as a result. So in small groups, come up with 3 solutions to delays in customer service. So if you happen to be trying to problem solve, why is it that there is a delay with response time? Then why don't we collectively problem solve this? And then lastly, activities. So I think that activities are extremely fun, but they need to be tested beforehand. And that's something that people may not take as seriously. But if you don't actually make sure that you have clear instructions and that you have an understanding of the expectations and what you want to get out of that activity, what you hope will be the takeaway, then your activity may not be successful. But just imagine how you can actually turn a regular presentation on, for example, you are doing a presentation on the quarterly sales, and you want to present that there is a downtrend and that we've lost some sales, and you're trying to figure it out. You, as the presenter, already have the answer. But imagine if you turn that into an activity instead, where the audience was there and able to look at the data themselves and see what are some of the things that you noticed. So instead of telling people every bit of information, create an activity where you allow for the audience to come to maybe a similar conclusion, or better yet, offer a perspective that you might not have noticed at the outset. So anything can be turned into an activity. Don't just assume that a regular presentation to your colleagues, your peers, has to always be 10 minutes of you speaking. You can also engage them and ask them what they think, and that will then create and add to your presentation. So I'll take a slight pause. Are there any questions so far about anything that I've said? If there aren't any questions, all you have to type is type in N. So that way I know that I can move on and everyone is accounted for. Okay, cool beans. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the second part. PowerPoint does not equal the presentation. And I know we've all been there. We've all had to deal with death by PowerPoint. But this is something that I think I understand why it happens, but I hope to change your mind about how to use PowerPoint if you are guilty of this equation where PowerPoint equals the presentation. So first, I would like to get your thoughts. Oopsie, there we go. On this window, I want to know from you guys what makes a successful presentation, because you have been in tons of them. You have done your own presentations. What makes a presentation successful that you have learned what you needed to learn, where you felt engaged, where you enjoyed being in that presentation? What makes it successful? What made it successful? Not being monotonous, absolutely. The messages get delivered. Just simply, you get straight to the point. When there's interactivity, yes. What are some other things that you know for yourself as audience members and probably as people who have presented before? What makes it successful? Free of jargon, yes. So free of words that are extremely specific to an industry or don't necessarily mean something outside of that industry. So I'll circle back uh, or where I don't even know some other jargon. There's like tons of it. I actually remember I was in a presentation very recently where I was laughing a little bit at how many acronyms were being used. So I felt a little lost. Something to laugh or smile about together. You get directly to the point and use PowerPoint as slide helpers instead of reading the slide. Absolutely. When the audience is engaged with the presenters, absolutely. When the audience receives a valuable lesson, absolutely. Any other ideas of what makes successful presentation? I would add short. Okay, so a couple of more popped up. Not having too much text in the slides when there is some element of storytelling. Yeah, I think I got everybody's right now. Okay, so I think we are good. So thank you so much for your thoughts. So what I want to impart is that you all already understand what makes a successful presentation. You already know that what will help you walk away with a smile on your face or something to think about. But the way that you do that is by being as authentic and understanding what your point is for your presentation. And it cannot be something that is completely guided or reliant slash dependent on PowerPoint. You want to, as somebody put in the Jamboard, you want to make sure that people are thoughtfully using the slides as a tool and not letting the slides guide the presentation. And another thing is that when people think to themselves, you're told by your boss, you have to do a presentation on Monday, go forth. Many times people just click open on PowerPoint and just start typing and just start putting information in. Therefore, you start typing and creating a PowerPoint without necessarily thinking about what it is you want to achieve by the end. You start dumping information into your PowerPoint and not being really thoughtful about what it is that you want for the audience to remember. So instead, what you want to do is to actually practice your presentation without slides. Like I don't always need my slides. I will look at my slides for sure. I'm not saying that I don't use them whatsoever, but I'm not going to be reading off my slides or feel completely lost if my slides disappeared. Because we also live in we're living in a technological era, and it is far too common where a presentation gets corrupted for some reason, an image within your presentation gets corrupted. The font that you used is not the same font that is on the computer that you're using. And so then wingdings pops up or like little symbols pop up. we all have been witnessed, born witness to a presentation that has gone wrong because the PowerPoint or some element of the presentation was not available. And that's why it's important to try to be as flexible as possible. One of the main issues that PowerPoint slides end up having is that there is way too much text on that slide. When you are looking at a slide, as a human, and it's a fact that I like to share with people, it's like a scientific fact that I like to share, our brains process images 10 times faster than they process text. So if you put text, you're actually slowing the processing speed of the audience. And they are now trying to read what's on the text on the slide and pay attention to what you're saying, and also taking in and trying to get a sense of whether what you're saying is matching up with the text. And that's just absolutely wrong. The idea is that you should really try to use more images and less text as much as possible. So that way, the audience is more focused on what you are doing and not reading your slide. On top of that, just to prove my point about text being something that another point to make is that when you have fewer text, when you have less text, your brain processes words as images. You're not always reading every single thing. So as a native English speaker, for example, I think this little bit is weird, right? But I can totally read this because I'm processing the words as images, not reading actually. So if I were to read this, according to a research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in the word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole, right? Our brains think as images. Our brains love images. And so if you use more images, the brain is going to like your presentation a lot better. Thanks for the heart. I just saw it. So focus on images. And then the second thing is that you oftentimes end up reading rather than speaking. Now, obviously, with the previous slide, just eliminate that from bad practices. It was an example. I am not reading off of my slides. Some people do find that to be a little disturbing, and I understand that. They will still try to read the slide and listen to what I'm saying. But I'm forcing you, and I have been forcing you throughout the presentation to focus on me, not the slide. So this way, I'm asking you guys to pay more attention to the words coming out of my mouth, not on what's on the slide. If you know what you're trying to get, what point you're trying to make, then you can usually speak a little bit more comfortably, spontaneously. And that makes it just a little easier to relate. Like, I'm not reading off of anything. I'm just talking normally about a topic that I am passionate about. So consider that you should try your best to speak from the heart, know your text, use notes if you have to, but don't put all of that information on your slide. So, some solutions that I can offer on how to do that. First, consider creating a presentation outline with pre-planned questions and examples. I only came up with a few examples beforehand, so I can always tell, and this is why I always know that I need to take my own advice, which I did. So this is my presentation script for this very presentation. I did use it. I did create one, I should say. Create a presentation outline, but also consider examples, consider questions that you might want to ask. So that way you're not like, so when, I mean, like, it just allows for the presentations to flow when you come up with readily off the top of your head examples and you're not searching for them. So I'm already kicking myself a little bit for not having thought of every example. Next, another suggestion is to develop 2 types of slide decks. One that ends up being like the presentation, the one that you use to actually share with the audience. That one is going to be probably image focused if you've been paying attention. So this one will have maybe giant images, or it'll have your the charts that you might be using, the graphs that you might need to explain. And you keep it simple because there's only so much information that a person can take in, right? But we also know that people like to have that information in their hand. So you can create a second PowerPoint that has more text in it as the handout. So this is another tip that a friend of mine shared with me. And it's really easy to do that by going into PowerPoint and creating a section. And the first section can be the official presentation. The second section can be the presentation that you give as a handout. And then you select the section that you are using as a handout and you turn it into a PDF. And if you want to go through that, I can go through it with you at the end. Lastly, create a speaking script that you can follow without slides. Here in Cambodia, I am part of a group called Nerd Night. And every 2 weeks, the Nerd Night team helps 5, 6 people put together presentations on whatever topic they want. And it has to be for 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Each slide is 20 seconds each, and they only can do 20 slides. It's a really funky style, but it works and it's really fun. What I've always been very impressed by are the people who rehearse their presentation so well that if there happens to be a glitch, which every 3 or 4 events, there's like a random glitch, a blackout, something that happens really randomly, the person is able to just keep going and they stick to their 6 minutes and 40 seconds, even though the slide behind them may not be the slide that they had planned to speak on. These are the people who impress us the most and who also have the strongest rapport with their audience. So consider that. Yes, Kasifi, it is the Pecha Kucha format. That is exactly what we call it, Nerd Night here, but we always say that we are drawing on Pecha Kucha. Thank you for your question. So are there any questions up until this point? And if there aren't, you just type in N into the chat. Awesome pants. Okay. The last section, impress, but really try not to distract. And this is a really big one. This is specifically actually for online presentations, which we are going to be doing a lot more of. Yes, we might be on COVID on the other side, but I think that we are going to continue being in a virtual environment a lot more. And so something that I've found to be really irksome, like I'm talking to you right now, something that bothers me, is when people don't prepare in advance their windows or their screens that you are going to need to show during your presentation. So I think a really giant, like if there's one massive takeaway from this entire time together, is that I really recommend that you prepare in advance any of the windows or the screens that you are planning on using. For example, if you were inviting your boss to come to your office, would you want for your boss to see your desk like this? Even if your desk looks like this, you probably feel a little bad about it. And sometimes you can't help it. I get it. But usually you want to try to put your best desk forward, right? Well, it's the same thing for your desktop. This can actually be a pretty overwhelming desktop to look at. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not asking you to organize your folders. I'm not asking you to do that. But what I am asking you is to not share your desktop when you're doing a online presentation. As you can see, I have not shown you my desktop this entire time, right? I have only switched from PowerPoint and I switched directly to the window that I needed, the browser window that I needed for this presentation. So I encourage you to consider opening in advance any websites that you think you're going to need, including signing in. This is, again, such a huge time waster that people end up not realizing, especially when you don't always know or can guarantee the speed of your internet, right? I'm sure that many of you have thought that you could quickly go to a website and you just start typing it in and you're there, you're waiting, and your audience is like, just sorry, it's loading slow. Yeah, it doesn't normally take this long, sorry. Yeah. And then it asks you for a login. And now you're like spending additional 2 minutes typing in your password. It's just like, oh my goodness, no. And even if you're not showing this whole process, even if it's on the back end and it's just my image of you, then you end up with this the whole time. And it's just really awkward. So I think personally, a policy that you should have is that you should sign in ahead of time, open and load anything that you need ahead of time, applications that you might need to demonstrate, even examples within those applications. Consider preparing them ahead of time because you never know how quickly or slowly something is going to take. And it just adds a touch of professionalism when you prepare this in advance. You can also see here that I have my PowerPoint in a separate window. It's not actually taking up my entire screen. I can show you that right now. This is what I do in order to have the presentation not take up my entire screen so I can actually see the windows behind it. As you can see over here, I go to slideshow and then I scroll to the bottom and I click on set up show. And then I use right over here under show type, I click on window. So rather than presented by a speaker and getting that full screen, I then instead, I have just a little window that shows me only my slides. The drawback to that is that I don't get presenter view if I am doing this in a non-Zoom setting. But, and I can't anticipate, I can't see my slides coming up. But honestly, like, you should know your presentation. And so for me, it's just more comfortable for it to keep track of all the information that's on my screen, doesn't get hidden away. I can, for example, see when somebody chats, I can see the participants, I can see my windows behind me. So this is really, really, really critical piece of information. Prepare your windows in advance. Oops. The only thing is that annotation on Zoom is always a little tricky, I admit. Okay. So I'm going to end here just a couple of minutes early because I wanted to give a chance to folks to ask questions. But I do want to ask, what were some of the things that you thought were an important takeaway from this presentation? And we can go back to the Jamboard and you can share one helpful thing that you learned from this presentation, no matter what it was. I did keep it fairly simple because I didn't want to overwhelm with information and try to jam pack and give you a chance to also interact. But I would love to know, what are the things that, or what is one thing rather, that you felt was the most helpful? So tips on preparing and opening windows beforehand. I'm glad that that was a very important one. You had a good speed and easy to follow. That's really helpful as well. Yes. That is something that I definitely had to learn. I'm actually from New York, and my natural speaking speed is extremely fast. I'm from New York, but I also went to school in Texas, and Texas is in the South, and in the South they typically speak slower. And that was the first time where I had Americans telling me that they could not understand me because I was speaking so fast. And so here I've had to really slow down. Then the interaction, poll, and Jamboard. Yes. So Jamboard is something that I absolutely love. It's a little bit limited because you can only have about 40 to 45 people in a Jamboard at once. But if you have like just that amount, then it's really nice to use as a way to collect information, and then you can use it as a takeaway. It's completely free. And as long as you, if you have a Google account, all you have to do is literally go to jamboard.google.com. You can see it over here. You can go to jamboard.google.com, and then you can create your first Jamboard and use that. And if you can share the Jamboard so that other people can join. And just like any other document in Google, you do have to change the permissions so that you are allowing people to edit and not just simply view. Then let's see, the impact of the interactions at the beginning. Yes, thanks. Yeah, I again really think it's fun to just kick off with something a little bit silly, but also to engage as quickly as possible. The session outline and presentation slide. Yeah, I learned that trick pretty early on in my time as an online trainer, as a presentation trainer, is that it's helpful for people to know where you are going and to anticipate. So it's sort of like the opposite of spoilers. Don't just simply assume that the audience is going to want to go on that presentation journey with you. Instead, tell them what to expect. Prime their brain, get them thinking about what to expect, and then meet those expectations. So that's always a very helpful way. And you don't just simply say like, first I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and third I'm going to do this, but you really stick to it and you use that in your presentation. So a lot of people do have agenda outlines, but they go through it so quickly and never really reference it later on. Concrete suggestion on prep. So slide decks, speaking script, very cool. Again, it's a little bit more work, but then if you really feel that you need to create like a text heavy presentation, just again, remember what it's like to be in the audience. Remember that not everyone is going to remember what you shared. And you want to keep it, you want to give everyone a fair chance at processing that information. Closed questions, yes or no, true or false, easy to answer and doesn't corner the audience. Absolutely. I do think that discussion questions are always a little challenging. I know, and I did them several times. I'm doing it to you right now. But if you open up and ease into it, it allows for the audience to have low stakes, less pressure in answering. Tips on how to create content of presentation and about the messy word. So, right, making sure that when you are putting images, that our brains love images so much that even a sentence can be turned into an image. Even a word can be turned into an image. That's how much our brains love images. So use that to your advantage. The tools that you can use with Zoom. Absolutely. I used Jamboard here, but Zoom also has a whiteboard feature that you can use by clicking on New Share if you have the ability to share, and then clicking on Whiteboard. So that's something that a lot of people may not know. Whoops, I can do it. I can do it right now. Clear. Oh, sorry, I keep on putting like little arrows everywhere. There you go. So this is another example of something that you can use is a Zoom whiteboard. So you can type on it, write on it, and do whatever you need to on it. It's just another tool that you can use. Four types of audience interactions. And then, yeah. Okay, great. This is wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So to conclude, and to summarize, the three things that I definitely hope that you can take away and walk away with from this hour together is that you want to build participation, you want to practice, and you want to prepare. You build participation by finding small ways to interact, whether you use polls or breakout rooms, but just keep in mind, try not to complicate things too much. You want to practice, so make sure that you present ahead of time. I was practicing this presentation right before you guys signed on, and because I practiced, I actually came up with a couple of different ideas for examples to use in this presentation that were not there earlier this week when I finished my slides. So when you practice, you also have the chance to generate ideas. And then prepare. Think and prepare ahead of time what you think you're going to need to make this whole experience as easy as possible. Like I said, don't just simply share your desktop because it's easy. Think about the types of windows that you might need, so that way you can just smoothly transition your audience from one to the other without needing to have a lot of lag time. If this has been somewhat helpful for you and you would love to get in touch with me for whatever reason, you can reach me by email, which is my first dot my last name. You can also find me on Facebook with my full name. And then you can also look me up on LinkedIn. I will admit I am not a LinkedIn person, but it is updated enough and I do check it once a week. So yeah, you can reach me in those ways. And once again, I would like to thank Chitra and Slash for having me. I am the first of a few other, sorry, I am the first of several other people to this month and these couple of months that are presenting. And so thank you so much for trusting me to go first. So if you are interested in any of these next events, please don't hesitate to register and check them out. They really do look very interesting. And you can check out the calendar by clicking on this link.